I don't know how you feel about socks, but I feel very strongly about them. Before coming to London, I stocked up on my favorite socks from Chile, but they're starting to die and I am devastated. Hello everybody, I'm Roxy, this is Chaotic Bibliophile, and today I bring the low-key overdue book club March pick wrap-up, which is a very long-winded way of saying that I am going to talk about There Are Little Kingdoms by Kevin Barry. This is a short story collection that I've been meaning to read for years. Basically, I discovered Kevin Barry 2018, 2019, whenever I was really into discovering new Irish authors, and now I've discovered so many and yet I haven't had time to read them all. Such is life. But I got really into Kevin Barry's writing. He is an author that really works for me. Whenever I mentioned him, everyone asked whether I had read this collection. When I said no, they always said, oh, it's his best one. And so before I get into it, I am going to link the April and May announcements so you can go check them out. I am going to review the collection as a whole, and then I'm going to talk about my favorite stories and some specific aspects of it. I'm not going to summarize the stories because that would take a little too long. So if you are here for a general review, stick around and then you can move directly to the outro because all the chapters are marked. But if you've read this book with me and want to discuss specific stories, also please leave them in the comments. Regardless of your opinions, I am very interested in knowing what they are. And if I don't discuss a story that you really wanted to talk about, also tell me down below. I really like this, but I think not everyone is going to like it the same way. It's a bit like Dubliners by James Joyce. Not that same vibe, but it has that lineage, let's say, because it's all about plays. They are all vignettes of the ordinary being rarefied through the lens of which they are told. Kevin Barry is from Cork, I think. I remember reading an interview with him where he talks about Cork becoming this literary city, very up and coming, and I agree, biased, but I am not judging a prize here. This is my book club. I can be biased. I love the range of ages he covers. That is something I noticed in his other collection that I read, Dark Lies the Island, asterisk. I do think I liked Dark Lies the Island a bit better. So I don't know if I agree that this is his best. This is also his debut collection, so I think a lot of people read this, held it in such high esteem, also because it's such a strong collection that then they sort of conceptualized it as his best one. But I would say Dark Lies the Island reads a bit more realized. It doesn't really matter, but there you go. I feel like what Kevin Barry is trying to do and really comes super close to in this collection is trying to grasp the complexities of the daily existence of being human and sort of the ironic absurdity of it from a very sincere place, but it does use irony and it does use humor in a way that can be very ruthless. And all of that in relation to place and community and sort of the individual against community. And I just find it so fascinating. There is a sense in many of the stories of an already pastness that is kind of melancholic, but not nostalgic in a way that is, oh, it was better before. It's kind of like, oh, we are haunted by the past, and this is not good necessarily, but it is a fact. And I think having protagonists in different age ranges accentuates this because it deals with teenagers, it deals with older people, and everything in between, especially men. I will say it's a very male-centered collection. Not all of the stories are male, but even the ones that deal with women feel very male. Not in a bad way, not in a misogynistic way by any means, but it is a very male sensibility and it's completely fine. And the writing, oh my god, if the word wordsmith has ever been appropriately used, it would be for Kevin Barry. He's just so good. He has these moments of description that made me go kind of like, yes, this, but also make me do a double take because some of the descriptions are a bit out there and you kind of have to pause and go, okay, what is the metaphor mapping here? Does it really work or does it just sound good? And what I personally found while working through those metaphors was that it did work. It did check out. It just feels so sharp and accurate, but at the same time, like Kevin Barry is truly having fun. I think that is a lot of the point of these stories, that even though they are sad and ironic a lot of times, they are also very sincere in the fun and the analysis they are presenting, and they are always tender with the characters, even when they are being put through ridiculous, painful, or melancholic situations. There were some stories that I wasn't that moved by, but definitely the success rate is at least 50-50, which doesn't sound like it was so great, but I was really choosy with the stories that I thought were outstanding. And then there were one or two that truly I felt were a bit meh, and the others I enjoyed. It's not going to be, I think, one of my favorite collections, but it has some stories that I just keep thinking back to. I will get to that in the discussion section. The last thing that I want to talk about is the many different modes of narration that it has. Not only a lot of vocalizations and a lot of ways of approaching stories, but also it has a lot of different narrators that are very odd and are very just strange and are put in strange situations. Not in a way that is weird, truly weird, as in Jeff Vandermeer weird, but it is kind of off kilter, and it really worked for me. I think all of the narrators were so compelling, and they made me go, okay, let's see where this goes. Again, not every story arrived at a place where I was super satisfied or I thought, yes, this is the best story I've ever read. But the ones that were successful were nearly perfect, and there were a lot that were really good. So I just think Kevin Barry is a very good author. I understand he is not for everyone, but if you're interested in reading contemporary Irish fiction, he is a really good pick, because he really is in conversation with the entire literary heritage, but also he's very now, and this interplay of past and present is so apparent in his stories and so apologetic about it and works so well. Can't recommend him enough. Although I wouldn't recommend him to everyone, I still recommend him. So there you go. I think this was a perfect pick for the Irish Readathon. Link down below that announcement so you know what the hell I'm talking about. And this does fulfill one challenge, which is read a book with a green cover. To be fair, it is a bit more aquamarine than anything else, but it is in the green spectrum. So now getting into the individual stories. The first story, right, Atlantic City, about these teenagers at a party, I thought was alright. It was a strong opening, but it didn't blow me away. It already established that key of loss of innocence, already pastness, and so I liked it for that. It also had this very strong identity of place again. It felt very recognizable, this recurrent theme with the game that they play over and over, and like being the leader at that game. It's very obvious, but it was handled very delicately and I enjoyed it. It was not one of my favorites, however. The next one was To the Hills. Just the humor, the point of view, and how it shifted from one to another through the third person, I thought was hilarious. The sexual politics involved, hilarious. Sorry, I got distracted like a pigeon by the light of my tablet. I thought it worked so well. Kevin Barry has these pathetic men sometimes that he mocks, but not in a cruel way, and I think it works very well, and I just deeply enjoy it. It's one of the stories, for example, that I would teach if I were going to teach third person Friedrich style and for third person close vocalization, that sort of thing, and how subjectivity is interwoven into the third person and generates humor. I think it's a good story about that. See the Tree, How Big It's Grown. That story, everyday absurdism done right, I would say. How it plays with memory and how it leaves us wondering whether it purposefully ignored memory or a suppressed memory that is being unearthed, or truly he does not remember everything. It's just so good. Animal Needs, I don't really remember. The only thing that I wrote down next to it was meh. So if you really liked it or really hated it, please tell me what you thought about it, because I honestly don't remember. Then there is a story that I do not consider on my top, but I keep thinking back to, and it also has a quote that I just love. For me, the idea of this chatty woman approaching everyone, right? It feels very tiring. It got old very fast, but then the last paragraph, I still think about it all the time. And I do think I need to reread the story in order to know if knowing the ending sort of reframed the entire story effectively. But it did reframe the story as I think about it afterwards, because it sort of made it come together for me, and it made me think of, oh, how an ending, specifically in the short story form, because of the nature of the form, can tie the entire story together. So we'll see when I reread it what I think about it. She flips the keyguard of her phone and scrolls her texts, which, asterisk, I really like that these stories, a lot of them are set in the now. Some of the stories are set in the past, but you know how there's this big discussion as to why authors never include technology, never make the stories feel like they are of our time, which is the opposite of when you are writing historical fiction, right? You go out of your way to make it seem like it's that time. Why doesn't the opposite happen? There are reasons, but we are not going to discuss them now. I'll continue. She moves on again, straight-backed and hard-eyed, with world-class invulnerability. She doesn't know that every step from now will change her. She's so open, so fluid. Every conversation will change her. Every chance meeting, every walk down the street. Every walk, every street. Also the repetition, right? That driving home of the point, it's just done so elegantly, and the rhythm. Okay, and then Party at Helen's, which I also enjoyed. Again, these games that he plays, what I admire a lot about him is that he does a lot with writing in a way that you wouldn't conceptualize as experimental, because it's not playing with syntax or structure necessarily, but maybe it is experimental just because it's playing around so much with point of view and sort of how many ways can you approach stories and storytelling of the everyday, and how many ways you can try to grasp the way people think about situations and the way they communicate situations and the way they relate to each other in these situations. How many ways, and how can I tell this in a way that is fresh but also truthful? I think that is sort of what's going on. So how the situation and the people and how they are described sort of shifts as the story progressed. I think it was really clever. Sorry, I skipped breakfast wine, which by the way has such a great opening line. They say it takes just 3 alcoholics to keep a small bar running in a country town. And while myself and the cousin, Thomas, were doing what we could, we were a man shy. And these were difficult days for Mr. Kelleher, licensee of the North Star, Pierce Street. And I don't know why, it's just the idea that, you know, they say it takes 3 alcoholics to keep a small bar running. It tickled me. I thought the story was great. Again, inserted into this tradition of the pub story, and the outsider comes, has a pint, reminiscing, and I just thought it was really well done. Then there are Little Kingdoms, the title story. What I appreciated most about the story was the way it dealt with place. In the other stories, there is a sense of place, right? But this story deals with the idea of place because it deals with like the personal home in the city, a source of anxiety that while Barry was writing these stories was starting to become an issue, and now it's become a crisis basically. And so the way it deals with that and the idea of, right, the little kingdom as the home and what that entails, I just thought it was very moving and I really enjoyed it. And finally, the penguins. What a wacky story to also end the collection in, but it's very symbolic, right? Because it's about being in the Arctic or Antarctic, one of those. I feel like I should know which one on account of Chile and the Antarctic, but I don't remember. Yeah, this idea of being stranded, which again has been done before, I feel was not the typical way that you would do at such a story. This story feels so chill. There is a circularity to the story that also works well with wrapping up the entire collection, but it was still odd. I don't know, I guess because all of the other stories deal with things that feel very immediate and very plausible, but this one starts with a crazy premise and then sort of normalizes that crazy premise, gives it the same treatment that it's given the rest of the stories. I think it really worked. It is a really memorable note to end on, and it really worked for me. And so going back to Burn the Bad Lamp, which is now one of my favorite stories that I've ever read, it also has such a great opening. A man walks into a corner shop. He is a nervous man, easily knocked from his groove, and it is a great disturbance to him when he is addressed by a 4-foot-tall chicken. The take on the trope of the genie and the 3 wishes and wasting or not wasting those 3 wishes, and the humor and the way it plays out, I need to reread it to provide coherent analysis of it. I haven't been providing any coherent analysis. I feel like it's more gushing and, oh, I like this, I like this. So please feel free, if you didn't like this, which I would understand, leave me your comments saying why that was the case. I'm very interested in hearing. I promise I won't get upset. I really want to discuss these stories if you read them, because I'm really interested. But yeah, going back to Burn the Bad Lamp, I am a sucker for stories that interrogate the everyday and what it means to lead a good life in the context of the everyday, especially if it uses absurdist but not ridiculous structures to get to that. I just think Kevin Barry can write, and he can write in a way that means that form and content are inextricable from each other. The stories are good because he treats them in a certain way and he writes them in a certain way. I will continue to read him. Now I'm finally free to buy his latest collection. So that was There Are Little Kingdoms by Kevin Barry. If you read this book with me, thank you so much for participating. Please leave as many thoughts as you have down below. And if you didn't read it this month but have read it in the past, please also leave your comments down below. I am really interested in knowing. And if you haven't read it but are interested, also please do let me know. It would be amazing if I have enticed some people to read this collection. I will not be responsible if you don't like it. I just feel like I should supply that caveat because it is not a hard book to read. It's just, I feel a very specific thing that it's doing, but what it's doing to near perfection. So I really admire that. And so that's it. See you next time. My notes are starting to get very muddled.